Hello everyone, my name is Alexandre, my colleagues are Jussara, Fabrício and Marisa, and we are from the Universidade Federal de Minas Gerais, from Brazil, and I'm going to be presenting the paper analyzing the use of audio messages in WhatsApp groups. So just let me give a brief introduction of the problem. In Brazil and a lot of other countries, the main form of communication, mobile communication nowadays, is through WhatsApp, which is a free messaging app from Facebook, and it has more than 1 billion monthly users across the globe. And one of the main factors, interesting properties of WhatsApp is what they call groups. So many families will have groups with 10, 20 people. We have work groups which range from 50 to 100 groups. We have groups for your university, and usually there are a lot of people with different ideas, and these groups play an important role in information dissemination. And a lot of is being discussed that these groups, a lot of messages are being sent and people don't know what they are talking about, and usually they contain a lot of misinformation, for example. So they are affecting a lot of major discussions in our society, such as elections. And one major problem of the Brazil's 2018 election was that it contained a lot of misinformation going through these networks, and people don't really know what was being shared and what kind of information was being discussed that was completely fake, and they may alter the course of the election, for example, and a lot of other debates about vaccines and other things like that. And many studies looked at the content dissemination in WhatsApp of text and images. However, text and images usually cannot necessarily convey tone of urgency, emotion, and other things. So understanding audio messages is really important. And like I said, not many studies on audio messages specifically, and in many groups, audio messages are a predominant way of sending messages and talking to other people. And this is a first effort to better understand audio dissemination overall. So we're interested in two things. We are interested in finding characteristics of audio messages, like content properties, propagation dynamics, and we are also looking into introspect properties of audio content. We are overall trying to understand what is being said and how it is being propagated through the network. So let me talk about dataset collection and grouping. We use a dataset that consists of messages sent in public WhatsApp groups during 6 months. So we looked at social media and people that were sharing invite links to public groups, and we're looking to those messages. And this dataset specifically was used in other works, and they usually focused on text and images. And one of the major problems we faced is that we had to group similar audios. We can't do a bit by bit comparison on two audios and check if they are the same, because usually we have different compression algorithms, or they were being cut 1 second short, but the content is still the same, and so we have a lot of these variations. So to group equal audios, we use the fingerprinting method, such as just like Shazam uses, for instance, to find music. So this was one way that we use to overcome this problem. So we group audios that were equal with the same content. So just giving a brief overview, this is the period that we're looking for, and we focused on two major periods in Brazil. The first one was a trucker strike that we had here, and the second one was the electoral campaign of 2018, which comprises of this time period. So in both of these periods we've seen a huge spike in messages being sent in these groups. So just giving a brief overview of the data set. On the trucker driver strike, we had more than 100 groups, more than 1,000 users, almost 6,000 messages, and when we group these audios, we get almost 1,500 unique audios. In the election campaign, we had a lot more content being generated, so we had 330 groups, 6,000 users, and almost 3,000 messages being shared, and when we grouped together, we got 8,500 unique audios. So just looking at the general characteristics of these audios, we first wanted to understand what categories were the audios in. So we asked 20 volunteers to annotate a sample of 300 audios, and we picked some possible categories for these audios, and more than a half of these audios were political content, so they were talking about any political message, and 35% of these audios were opinion related, so they were usually giving an opinion about a candidate or a strike or something like that. And the other major category was activism. So activism usually comprises of people calling for action, like going to the streets for a strike or something like that, or vote a certain candidate for a specific reason, and this kind of content. We had an inappropriate category, but it had a local and kappa, so the annotators didn't agree on this category very well, so we removed them from the analysis. And the other category is also very predominant, but is usually messages that were just two people talking about a non-specific topic. And the lifetime, which is an interesting thing that we compare to text. Lifetime is basically the time between first and last appearance of an audio. On the trucker strike, 50% of the audio stopped being reshared after 1 day. And on the electoral campaign, 50% of the audios remained shared for up to 2 days in the network. And when comparing to text messages, we can see that audio had a shorter lifetime when comparing to text. So it disappeared from the network more quickly than text messages. Another interesting thing is the intershare time, which is the time interval between consecutive reshares. And 60% of the audios are reshared within 3 hours, and 20% are reshared within 6 minutes. And these audio messages tend to spread more slowly than text messages. One hypothesis is that it takes more effort to listen to audio messages than to read text messages. So people will share a lot at a later time when they are available, and they can just read a text message anywhere they are. So talking a bit about content and propagation, we try to understand a little bit better of the speech versus music distribution in the audios. So we used a pre-trained neural network to classify audios between speech, and we can classify between male and female versus music. And over 80% of the audios are speech, and in both periods they are predominantly male. And in the election campaign, we had almost double the amount of music that we had in the trucker driver strike, and they usually were predominantly campaign jingles for a specific candidate. And just talking a little bit of how speech versus music spread differently, and we noticed that music audio spread more in the network. Usually, for instance, in the unique groups per message, we had speech appeared in 3.3 groups on average, and music appeared on 4.8 groups per average. And this is true for unique users per message and shares per message. So they appeared in more groups, they were shared by more users, and they had an overall more share count. Another thing that we try to understand a little bit better is what differs from messages that were shared a lot versus message that were not so shared. So to understand this a little bit better, we first transcribe each audio using Google Speech to Text API to analyze the content. And one of the main problems of this method is that we don't know if we're introducing a lot of noise because the transcription isn't good enough. So to validate this transcription, we ask volunteers to rate the transcription and listen to the audio. So they had both the transcription that was given to us by Google Speech to Text, and they also listened to the audio and they rated from 0 to 4, and 0 being the transcription wasn't good enough, did not express the audio exactly the way it sounded, and 4 being it matched the audio perfectly. And one thing that Google provides us is a confidence score. So we noticed that audios that had a 80% or more confidence score were also highly rated as to be having a good transcription. So we only selected audios that had an 80% confidence score or more to do this analysis. And we noticed that messages that were more shared tend to have a more sad tone. They usually had attributes such as negation, needs, and achievements. So they were really sad, or they talk about future, work, family, and how they could achieve certain things. And others that had a more religious tone, or they had a lot of anger, swear, they usually weren't shared as much as these audios. So we could see this different distribution of psychological linguistic features. And finally, just talking a little bit about misinformation, we had a fact-check news data set which contains a lot of fact-check news from agencies, and we calculate the similarity between our audio transcriptions and the fact news data set, and we picked the top 300 audios and we more similar audios, and mainly analyze these audios to find audios that really contain misinformation. And what we found is that audio with misinformation reached on average 376% more groups, and they were shared by a number of users 480% higher than the unchecked messages. So these audios usually spread faster and they reach a lot of more people than audios with unchecked content. And this is a really important topic that a lot of people are having at the moment, of how much misinformation is spreading through through social networks, and WhatsApp is no different than any other social network. And so this is an important topic that we are looking into. This is a future work, and we are conducting a further study on this specific topic that requires a lot of attention. So, in conclusion, audio messages are a widespread form of communication on WhatsApp. We had 20,000 audio messages in 330 groups in the span of a few days. And messages are shared 3 to 4 times on average and lasts 1 to 2 days in the network. And just as I said before, when comparing to text, it takes longer to spread and lasts less in the network. And by transcribing these messages, we could extract different psychological attributes. And understanding what was being said easily, we also did a topic analysis that is on the paper. And analyzing misinformation is the next step that we're taking, and it's a very important next step. And we plan on publishing more things on this topic. So that's it. That's my presentation. Thank you all for coming, and goodbye.